Well, welcome everyone. Welcome everyone. So glad that you are here with us today for part 2 of plant medicines. Dr. LaPier is with us again and sharing her great information, reminding us that the connection to this knowledge, actually the knowledge of these plants connects us to the natural world. And for our survival, we actually have to be connected to the natural world. So her information is vital. And just welcome everyone from all corners of the 4 directions, the 6 directions, I should say, and sit back and get ready for our webinar today. I'm just going to I want to say a few things about Dr. LaPier first. And she is Blackfeet and Métis. And we'll be showing how we can incorporate traditional medicines back into our daily lives. She is a writer, environmental historian, and traditionally trained ethnobotanist. She learned ethnobotany and traditional ecological knowledge by apprenticing with her maternal grandmother, Annie Mad Plume Wall, and her Aunt Theresa Still Smoking for more than 20 years. And you'll see that we have an ASL interpreter present for those of our relatives who need that. So Dr. LaPier, welcome. I'm going to check my, I just feel a little like I have to 2-step here because I want to make sure I follow my agenda and get everything in. So this is part 2 of our plant medicine series. And we will drop the link for part 1 in the chat if you are missed the first part. So Dr. LaPier, if you are ready, we can begin.
Great, thank you, Sandy, and thank you, the National Coalition of Native American Healing Coalition. Sorry, I said that backwards. Again, for inviting me to give a presentation on traditional plant knowledge and how to incorporate traditional plants into your daily life. I appreciate the opportunity. And again, as I'm beginning to speak, I encourage folks in the chat to tell us where you're from and to introduce yourselves. And that way we can have kind of a community of people sharing with each other while I'm talking. And then when we get to the Q&A, we can have more of a conversation. So I'm going to share my screen and start the presentation. So hold on 1 second, sorry.
I forgot to mention that we are recording this. For those of you who need to know that, we started the minute Dr. LaPier, I believe, presentation started.
So yes, as has been mentioned, this is the second, actually 3rd presentation that I'm providing for NABS. And this one, again, is focusing on traditional medicines that you can add to your daily life for your healing journey. Oops, excuse me. So I want to start by letting you know what I'm going to be talking about this morning. I always try to begin with a centering quote and end with a centering quote to have us think about sort of what is our relationship with the natural world and that connection. I'm also going to share a little bit about where I learned about plants and a little bit about what is cultural genocide and the legacy of cultural genocide and why we should, be reconnecting with the natural world and learning about plants. And then in the second half, I will be talking about everyday health and healing. I will be sharing 8 plants that we can use for health and healing, and then just where you can learn more about this information. As has been mentioned, earlier this year, I did do a similar presentation where I also focused on 8 plants, and last year gave another presentation. Those can be found on the NAB's YouTube page. I try in all of these presentations to overlap a little bit so that you're learning as you're going through and being at the webinar live or watching it later as a presentation on YouTube, that you are learning a little bit of information and there's an overlap sort of each time. So I want to start with a quote from Christy Belcourt, and I used Christy Belcourt last time as well. I like their what they share about our relationship to the natural world and how to reconnect to the natural world. And as most folks maybe know, Christy Belcourt is a really well-known Métis artist in Canada. And one of the things they really focus on is the natural world, and a lot of their paintings, etc., are on plants and also animals. So let me read this to you. And this is a quote that she gave when she talked about why she uses plants and what do they mean in her paintings and in her work. So she says, "The roots show that all life needs nurturing from the earth to survive, and represents the idea that there is more to life than what is seen on the surface. It also is to represent the great influence our heritage has over our lives. The lines which connect the plants symbolize our own interconnectedness with each other and all living things within creation. The flowers and leaves reach upwards as we seek out our individual spirituality and look to our uncertain future." So I really appreciate, again, her sharing that and sharing that with you to think about sort of what it is we're interested in learning about and thinking about sort of what plants are, why they're important, but also because we will talk about roots as well, talk about what we don't see when we're out there in the natural world, and that's what's under the ground, sort of the root life. So I want to start by sharing where did I learn about plants? And I learned about plants, as has already been mentioned, primarily from my oldest aunt, who is my mother's older sister, and my grandmother, my maternal grandmother. But I wanted to share, this is an image of 7 generations of my own family, myself towards the end here, and my children, but sort of this history of passing down Indigenous knowledge from kind of family member to family member, and where people learned that information. At least in the Blackfeet tribe, one of the things that we try to recognize is when people share knowledge with you and you learn knowledge from somebody, is to acknowledge who those people are. It's very similar to the academic world. In the academic world, when we study and we get a PhD, we say, so-and-so was my advisor, and that so-and-so was their advisor. And like, we always say who we learned from and where we got information. And it's same in Indigenous communities. We always say who we learned from and where we got information, so that we acknowledge those people, acknowledge that history. So in my particular case, as was mentioned, I primarily learned from my oldest aunt, whose Indigenous name was Holy Thunder Woman, and from my maternal grandmother, whose Indigenous name was Swift Fox Woman. I worked with them in a traditional learning process where I apprenticed with them, and I apprenticed with them over a number of years. And as part of that apprenticeship process, I went out into the field with them. They taught me about particular plants. They taught me how throughout kind of the living process, and then also how to process the plants to use for medicines. They learned then, of course, from their ancestors. My grandmother and my aunt learned from my grandmother's mother-in-law, whose name was Hollering in the Air, and she lived with her mother-in-law for much of her adult life. And my grandmother also learned from her grandmothers because she was raised by two grandmothers because her mother had passed away during childbirth. And so she learned from Not Real Beaver Woman and from Big Mountain Lion Woman. And so as you can see from this image, we have sort of this, just within my own family, 7 generations of knowledge being passed down sort of from generation to generation and now to the most recent generation. I like to share this again to remind people that Indigenous knowledge is something that people utilized on a daily basis, utilized within our families and communities. And it was not thought of as something that was just sort of flippantly known. It was something that people became educated in, and it was something that people would pass down from generation to generation. And then just to let you know, the images on here are images, let's see, from, I guess, from the left to the right, an image of my grandmother with one of her grandmothers, and that's Mary Spotted Bear or Not Real Beaver Woman. The middle picture is a picture of my grandmother and my grandfather, my mother's parents. And then the last picture is a picture of myself and my grandmother about 20 some years ago. My grandmother did live to be 97. And so she had a full sort of lifetime of experiences and knowledge that she was able to pass on from these various generations down to the current generation, including my children who got to know her well into adulthood. The next thing I wanted to mention was cultural genocide. So cultural genocide does have a definition, and I'll read it to you. So cultural genocide is the systemic destruction of traditions, values, language, and other elements that make up one group of people distinct from another. Cultural genocide is something, and genocide are both recognized by the United Nations as parts of public policy that certain countries have had in the past or may have in the future. And the United States, as we know, and Canada as well, have used residential schools or boarding schools as instruments or tools of cultural genocide as a process to destroy, as we know, Indigenous traditions that include our languages, our religion, our cultural processes, but especially our family relationships. And one of the things that I want us to think about as we share today about and learn today about Indigenous knowledge is this process of healing from cultural genocide or the legacy of cultural genocide. And how do we do that? And really the step towards healing from the legacy of cultural genocide is to revitalize the traditional knowledge that was attempted to be destroyed or erased by governmental policies, by revitalizing our languages, our culture and religion, but also recreating community and recreating family relationships. One of the things that was really an effort that the United States government and the Canadian government made was to destroy our family and community and kinship relationships. And so it's important that as part of this process of healing from cultural genocide and healing from the impact of boarding schools is that we revitalize Indigenous knowledge. One of the things that I encourage people to do, especially as they are reconnecting with the natural world and reconnecting with our plant relatives, is to really think about doing this in community. Oftentimes I see people as they are relearning and revitalizing Indigenous knowledge, that they're doing this kind of on an individual basis. But this is really something that in this whole process of the legacy of cultural genocide is really think about how to reestablish and recreate community and relationships. And so relearning about the natural world in community and not just as an individual. So one of the things that I like to emphasize about why we should be learning about the natural world, or that we should be learning about plants, as I just mentioned, is really that we need to be thinking about, you know, how we can breathe kind of new life into these relationships. And so I like to use a lot of our words. And for those of you who were in the last seminar, the last webinar, I shared this slide with all of the R words that I like to use. Of course, they're all in the English language, but these are kind of words that you should think about and post, you know, kind of on your workspace, or if you're at home, you know, at your mirror, of the things that you want to do during any given day. And so we do want to be thinking about recreating these relationships as an act of resistance, but also, again, these are words of revitalize, reinvigorate, re-energize, restore, renew, revive, rejuvenate, refresh, reawaken, rekindle. You know, this is really what we want to be doing in terms of how we heal from this history and this legacy of cultural genocide, is how do we really just revive and revitalize all of these relationships that we have had in the past. And one of the things that I have mentioned before, and this is a real strong, you know, philosophy that I have, is there's no shame. There's no shame in not knowing about the natural world, not knowing about these relationships, not knowing about plants or having plant knowledge, because it really was stripped from us during this history of boarding schools and residential schools. So I want to continue on by then talking about everyday health and healing practices. And this, again, this is something that I share often when I give presentations, to think about when and at what point you want to add and include traditional plants into your daily life. So what are the things you should include kind of in your daily life anyway, to have, you know, kind of a healthy lifestyle? So these are the things that, one, you're going to hear from your grandmother every day, but you're also going to hear them from the doctor. So one is make sure that you get exercise every day. The easiest exercise to do is walking. So one of the things I always encourage people to do is just go find a local garden in your neighborhood or in your city or town, and go walk in that every day, or your local park. Get good sleep every night. One of the things we're going to talk about in terms of the plants that I'm going to share with you today, several of them have to do with getting good sleep or relaxation, because it's one of the most often questions that I get asked. The third thing is, of course, healthy eating. I know that a lot of people, in terms of trying to revitalize our Indigenous knowledge and revitalize our Indigenous traditions, are moving back to adding Indigenous plant-based foods to their daily diets. And this is a lot easier to do than you think. And I listed a few of really basic ones here that you can find at your local store. And I'll just say this, some of these you can find at the dollar store. You know, you can find things like dried beans, sunflower seeds, pumpkin seeds, etc. at the dollar store. So this is not something that is very expensive, that you have to go to specialty stores. And some of them, such as wild rice, you can find easily, at least in the Midwest, but you can also find it online and even at your local grocery store. But some of these are inexpensive, easy to find, easy to include in your daily life. And you just need to sort of start thinking about how you're going to add them to your daily life, so that you can have healthy eating as part of your healing journey. The fourth thing to think about, of course, is how to sort of revitalize the cultural and religious practices of your own family, your own tribe, your own community. And almost all tribal communities had some sort of process to give gratitude towards the plants that we use in our daily lives. And so that's something that you should learn within your own community or family. And again, take those steps to try and find out what that is. Again, because there was this disruption because of cultural genocide, you might not be able to find that within your own family and community. And that's when you can then take the step outside of your family and community and look for, kinship, kin tribes or kin communities where you can learn some of these practices. And then the last thing I want to add is, after you do all of these other things, after you exercise every day, get good sleep, eat, really healthy, then if you still want to add native plants as part of your health and healing process, that's when you do it. You don't do it as the first step, you do it as the last step. And this is something that was instilled in me by my grandmother. My grandmother did do all of these things. Again, she lived to be 97. She did exercise every day. She always went on long walks. She got good sleep every night. And she had a big process about sort of getting ready to go to sleep to have a healthy nighttime, eating healthy every single day, and then practicing, again, those cultural or religious practices. At that point, then, you can add traditional plants for health and healing, whatever that might be. One of the things I want to add here is if people are interested in adding some of these plants, because this particular presentation, I'm going to be talking a lot about plants that are used for mood, for stress relief, anti-anxiety, for good sleeping, that some of these might have interactions with modern medicine. So definitely talk to a professional first before you add some of these, and just let them know at your annual checkup what you're using. I do that with my own practitioner, and so she knows everything that I'm using. And just to let you know, everything I'm going to be talking about today, I have used myself, which is why I selected them. Okay, so I want to share 8 plants that we can use for your healing journey. And again, I selected these primarily because one of the main questions that I often get, and I got during the last presentation, and I've gotten, actually this last semester, I had a couple of professors who contacted me because they wanted to add this to what they were teaching, is plants that have to do with mood and have to do with things like sleep and anti-anxiety, anti-stress, etc. And so I selected plants that are all native except one, which is chamomile. We'll talk about chamomile at the end. It's a non-native plant species. Plants that you can add to your daily life. And again, I selected these plants for a few reasons. One, they're easy to find at a local store. So if you're just a beginner, just learning, and you're reestablishing that relationship with the natural world and with plants, it's always easiest to just go to the store and start picking some of these up from the store and learning how to use them before you then go out into the wild or grow them yourselves. So these are plants that can easily be found, again, at the dollar store, some of them, not all of them, to specialty shops. You can also grow some of these yourself, anywhere from your balcony, like in a small pot, to if you have a yard or a larger area, to grow them outdoors. I also tried to select ones that you could wildcraft if you wanted, or forage in the wild. I would only do this, especially if you're a beginner, if you are with somebody who's knowledgeable, who can help you make sure that you're picking the correct plant and processing it correctly so that you can use it later. And then I also this time tried to select plants that are from across the United States. And so some of these are only in the Southeast, some are in the Northwest. And so some of them, depending on where you physically are, your community, your tribe, there might be a particular plant that your tribe would use, but another tribe might not use. And so I tried to pick some that were kind of across the United States. But again, I have used all of these, and so I can share that experience with you. And then the other thing is these are just all really easy to add to kind of your daily life. So I'm going to start and go through and talk about each one of these, and then I will leave some time for questions. So the first one is a native plant that you find in the Southeast. And so there's a lot of the tribes that are from the Southeast that use this. I was given gifted some of this year from a friend who's Choctaw. And this particular plant, why I'm introducing this as part of a talk where I'm primarily focusing on healthy mood and stress relief, is that oftentimes in our modern life, we drink way too much caffeine. We have way too much coffee. We have way too much soda that's got caffeine in it. And one of the things that we should think about doing is, one, reducing the amount of caffeine that we drink on a daily basis, because that's going to help with sleep as well. But also perhaps even changing what we're drinking to something that's more native. This is one of the few, I think it's the only one, at least in North America, one of the few in the world, herbs that has caffeine in it. And this is called yapin. And what's used is the leaves. It gets dried and turned into a tea. I'll just say it tastes, let's see, how can I say? It tastes very earthy. It kind of reminds me of green tea, which I really like green tea, the taste of green tea. And this one is more of a specialty product. You can wildcraft it down in the Southeast. You can grow it in your yard. But there's also a great online source, which I'm sharing here. Just FYI, I'm going to be sharing lots of different teas that you can buy in the store. And this is not a commercial. I'm just sharing ones that I have used. There's lots of other brands that are out there and ones that you're going to see in the store. And it's just perhaps I haven't used that brand if it still has the same ingredient. But the one that I used in this particular case was Cat Spring Tea. I really liked them a lot. And again, this is an herbal tea that has caffeine, not a high level of caffeine. But if you're interested in switching out and using less coffee and less soda that has got caffeine in it, this is a great way to start that habit of switching to having herbal teas in the morning. And then the next one, I think I've spoken about this every single time because it's kind of the universal, native plant that you can find all over native North America, and that's wild mint. There's a lot of different species of wild mint that are out there. There's also non-native species that you find in the store, which is peppermint and spearmint. They're in the same families, so it's fine. And you're going to have, for the most part, you're going to have the same medicinal qualities in all of these. Obviously, the leaves and the stem and sometimes the flowers are dried, are made into a tea. And just FYI, I do have on each one of these slides, I'll say at the very top what part of the plant you're using. Oftentimes you're using more than that, but that's usually the major part. So oftentimes, like in this particular case, I say that we're using the dried leaves, we use the dry stem, and we use the dried flowers as well. In this particular case, we don't use the roots, but some plants we do. Anyway, wild mint is used for a vast majority of things. The two main reasons that at least the Blackfeet use it is, one is it improves your digestion. So oftentimes people will drink wild mint tea during or after meals. And it's also used for stress relief. So it is something that people would drink sometimes on a daily basis, but when you're in those stressful situations, it is always helpful. One of the things that it's also used for, it is used in as a flavoring for other teas. Almost every one of the teas I'm going to talk about, again, is going to be blended with other stuff because sometimes it's a little too earthy tasting. So even the yapin, which again is an acquired taste, it tastes really earthy. And to me, it tasted like It tastes like green tea. You can always mix peppermint with that or some sort of mint tea with it just to make it taste better if that's to your liking. You can also use non-native species like hibiscus, which is going to add to the flavor. And in fact, most herbal teas, if you look at the ingredients, it's going to have one of 3 flavorings to kind of mask the earthy flavor of some of the herbal tea. And that's either going to be mint, hibiscus, or some sort of lemon. And so that's why all of your teas sometimes taste similar. This particular tea, what I like about mint is you can find it anywhere. And in this particular case, I included a photograph of the mint tea, which is actually made out of peppermint that you can find at the dollar store. So peppermint / spearmint, and if you want to go wildcraft, wild mint can be found pretty much anywhere. So easy to add to your daily life. The next one that's a favorite of mine, and I've talked about this in the past in previous presentations, is valerian. So valerian in this particular case, what you're going to be using is the root. You can wildcraft this. I'll just fair warning ahead of time, this one smells really terrible, and it tastes pretty terrible too. So there's almost always some sort of masking that gets included as part of valerian tea. Valerian is well known in Indigenous communities and around the world as a herbal remedy that improves your relaxation. It improves your sleeping. It's good for anti-anxiety. It is something, though, that if you're using it for those reasons, you really do have to use it on a daily basis. This is not something where you just kind of grab and go and you think it's going to be an immediate fix. It won't. But if it's something that you use on a regular basis, it does really work. I am a big believer in valerian. I use valerian on a regular basis, especially when you want to have good sleep at night. You can get it in the wild. You can get it at the grocery store. The easiest way to get it at the grocery store, I think, is the Celestial Seasonings Sleepy Time Extra. And the extra part of Sleepy Time is the valerian. They add valerian into it. There's a lot of other teas out there, and I think I've got a couple of other slides that might have some valerian in it. You can also use it as a tincture, and a tincture is basically a mixture, oftentimes, of a concentrated amount of the particular medicinal quality of that particular plant mixed with alcohol, but oftentimes tinctures are often not mixed with alcohol. But those you can just either add to water or you can just put them straight into your mouth. And so I'm sharing one here. This one is for a company called Herbs for Kids, Valerian Super Calm. Valerian can also be used for children, especially in the evening if they're having, again, difficulty having good quality sleep. Okay, another plant is skullcap. And in this particular case, you're using, again, similar to mint, and it is something that you would use the leaves. Again, you can buy it in the grocery store. Their Traditional Medicinals has a tea called Stress Ease. The main ingredient is skullcap. They also include other, again, flavorings to mask the flavor. And so in this case, they added cinnamon, and I think they've got mint in here as well. This is also one similar to the last two that I showed you that will improve kind of relaxation, stress relief, and an improved sleep. Skullcap, again, similar to valerian, has been used for thousands of years by Indigenous people. And so it's something that one of the things I would share about these, because I'm talking about plants that kind of do similar things, is one, they're from different parts of the United States. Again, different tribes have used these. And depending on, again, whatever your health, if you have current health issues, one of these might work better than a different one, which is why I'm sharing ones that are different plants, but that do similar things, because one might work better for you, or one might not have an interaction, for example, if you're taking medication right now, or if you're pregnant or you plan to get pregnant. So you want to talk to your doctor about some of these, or talk to a practitioner who knows what interactions might occur. So passion flower, similar to valerian and skullcap. You can get it in the wild. You can also get it at your local grocery store. It basically similar to the others. You're going to be using the leaves primarily, but you can use the stems and the flowers. It's made into a tea. This one definitely, again, improves relaxation, improves sleeping. Any of these ones that usually say improves relaxation or sleeping are also sort of anti-anxiety, anti-stress, and stabilizing your mood. In this particular case, traditional medicinals uses it in several kind of over-the-counter stuff. One is Cup of Calm. So if you've ever seen that in the grocery store, the main ingredient is passion flower, but they also include, again, lavender, mint, some other flavors to mask the earthiness of some of our medicines. And then there's one that I've used many times, which is called Nighty Night Extra from traditional medicinals. The main ingredient is valerian, but the secondary ingredient is passion flower. And so in this case, they're using two different ones that have similar qualities mixed together. And I believe in this one, in the Nighty Night version, they also include mint to mask the flavor. Another one that gets used primarily in south of the border. So in Mexico, a lot of people use linden flower. I would say this is very similar to mint in that it improves your digestion, it's a stress reliever, and it's something that oftentimes people would have, again, the same way we would have mint tea, which is with your meal or after your meal, just so that it's working in tandem to help improve your digestion and is good in the evening. This is easily found, I'll just say, in Mexican grocery stores across the United States, not oftentimes easily found in sort of a local grocery store because it's not as widely used, except it is one of the main ingredients in Celestial Seasonings, has a tea that I haven't seen lately, but it has been out there in the past, which is Tension Tamer. So Tension Tamer is a great tea, includes lots of different ingredients, but the linden flower is the main ingredient. And then again, different things to mask its or add to its flavor. The next thing I want to add, which is not a tea, which is flaxseed. So flaxseed, why I'm including flaxseed is because one of the things that, I'll just say this, Indigenous people knew, scientists are now learning, is that omega-3s are important for human health, but it's really important for improving your mood. Omega-3s are almost always found in fish, and especially fatty fish. And so oftentimes when you get an omega-3, because they're usually sold in capsules at the store, or your doctor may have told you start eating like salmon and some other, kind of oily fishes because they have omega-3 in them. But you can also have a plant-based omega-3, and the main plant-based omega-3 is flaxseed. Out here in the West, out here in Montana, flaxseed is something that literally grows in the ditch. You see this everywhere. And it's these beautiful little blue flowers that ultimately go to seed that you can find pretty much all across the West. It grows in disturbed areas. It grows out in the field. So it's pretty easy to find if you're interested in collecting and processing little itty bitty bitty seeds. The easier way to do it, the more modern way to do it, is you go to the grocery store. And one of the best places that, again, I'm only sharing products that I've used myself, is I always go to Bob's Red Mill, who has lots of different products, including flaxseed. You can get flaxseed whole, you can get flaxseed ground up, and you can get it in capsules as an oil. So if you want to use a plant-based omega-3, when you use omega-3, and the purpose of that, using the omega-3, is to improve your mood, this is something you should take on a daily basis, for sure. This is also something that children can take as well. So several of these things, such as valerian, I haven't talked about chamomile yet, chamomile and flaxseed, all can be used by children. Some of the other, and mint, some of the other ones I would talk to, again, a practitioner or a professional first to find out about using them with children as well. And the last one I want to share is chamomile. So chamomile is a non-native species to North America, but it grows in lots of places now, and it's also easy to grow in your yard. Chamomile is a really fantastic, plant that does some of these same things. It promotes relaxation and improves your sleep. It's really good, again, for anti-stress, anti-anxiety. It's something that instead of, like when you're going to that stressful meeting, and instead of bringing that giant latte or Mountain Dew, you should be bringing, like I am, a cup of chamomile tea, because chamomile tea is better for you and it helps you in those stressful situations. Again, easy to find. Again, in these photographs, I've got, you know, the brand that's at the dollar store. You can get chamomile at the dollar store. You can also use it as a tincture. So where to learn about plants, and this is my last slide, and then we can ask questions. So I think if there's any questions at this point, I'm not sure where folks want, where NABS wants you to put it, but I'm going to assume it's the Q&A on the lower part or the upper part of your Zoom. So where to learn about plants. So I always encourage people to start with family first. Go to your mothers, go to your grandmothers, go to your aunties, and ask them about the plant knowledge that you find, that you hold within your own family and within your own tribal community. Again, we know that because of this legacy of cultural genocide and legacy of the boarding schools, that is not often possible. And again, I want to share, you know, there's no shame. There's no shame in recognizing that disruption occurred and that you need to go elsewhere then to learn some of this information. The second place to go is kind of community, your own Indigenous community, or sometimes the broader community. There's always places like this, a webinar that you can take. This is a short webinar that NABS does. There are longer webinars that are several hours long. There's workshops. Local parks, local gardens will have stuff. And now increasingly, a lot of Indigenous communities in major areas, but also in reservation communities are doing webinars and workshops. The other place you can learn about these medicinal and native plants is your grocery store. Oftentimes there's people there, especially if it's a specialty store, who they know about how these plants work, and you can ask somebody and they're willing to share. The other place to look, of course, is books. There are a lot of great books now that are written by Indigenous writers. There's a lot of great Indigenous bookstores that you can buy them online. There's also places like the NABS YouTube page and other Indigenous communities and Indigenous organizations' YouTube pages where you can learn about native plants. And so again, where do we learn about these things? I say start with family first. If that's not an option, go within your own community to learn more, and then take that next step of learning from Indigenous writers and other Indigenous knowledge keepers who share this on YouTube. So I want to end again with our quote that we got from Christy Belcourt, and just think about, you know, why we're interested and why we're interested in learning about native plants and the natural world, and kind of this pushback against the cultural genocide that has been inflicted on our communities and our families, and that we really want to take that step towards revitalizing our relationship with the natural world, revitalizing our relationship with plants. And today is a great day to start. So I'll end there. And thank you everybody for taking time today to join us. And if there's any questions, I believe that our moderator will be joining us to share them.
Yes, I'm back. I forgot to introduce myself too, by the way, for our listeners. I always do that. I just start talking. My name is Sandy Whitehawk, and I am the Director of Healing Programs at NABS from the Rosebud Reservation in South Dakota, and being the moderator here today. Oh, this goes too fast, Dr. LaPier, goes too fast. I was trying to take screenshots because I wanted to give information out right away to some folks. And just thank you so much for all of this great info. Yes, we do have two things we want to take care of. The first is that we have some raffle winners. Yoo-hoo, you guys, I think we put it in the chat that we're having a raffle. You didn't have to do anything other than be here. And so the raffle winners are Jeanette Dakota and Rob Paul. Woohoo! Jeanette Dakota and Rob Paul are lucky raffle winners. The second thing I have is you said questions. Yes. And I don't know if the questions that were sent to me were actually for everyone to see, but I did have a question about diabetes. Somebody wanted to know what plant would be good for diabetes. And then another person was wondering if valerian is addictive.
Oh, those are good questions. So yeah, so in terms of diabetes, so again, I would start with the healthy living first, right? So remember, with diabetes, you've got to exercise every single day. You've got to have a healthy diet. You have to get good sleep. So you need to start with all of those things first. And then I would add, you also have to be hydrated. So make sure that you're getting your proper amount of, kind of water or tea intake. Having said that, there are particular plants that oftentimes are good to add because of diabetes, and oftentimes those are the same exact plants that you would be eating. So, for example, things like eating blueberries, eating huckleberries, those types of foods are good for your blood sugar. But for example, my grandmother, who was never diabetic, but she drank almost every single day, was a tea that was made out of huckleberry leaves. We've now learned that the leaves of some of the plants, such as blueberries and huckleberries, which are from the same family, also help moderate your blood sugar. But it's not going to matter if you don't do all those other things too. So you got to do all the other things, then you can add the plant-based teas as well. So I'll say that first. The question about valerian, I have not heard that valerian is addictive. And to my knowledge, again, Indigenous people have used valerian for thousands of years. And so it's not something that, that I've seen that in my own personal use, sharing it with other people in my own family using it. I have not seen that. So I'm not sure if that's true. But I'm willing to learn if it is and in what ways it is. So
thank you. Another question is, you mentioned that these plants some plants could be grown inside, and are there any of them that are toxic to indoor pets?
Oh, that's a good question. And I'll just say off the top of my head, I don't know. I don't know. And so that's something I can look into for another presentation. All
right, thank you. Is Yupon like yerba mate? Why is?
Yeah, I mean, they're different plants, and they have yapin actually does have caffeine in it, and so there are other herbs around the world that have either caffeine or other kind of stimulant in it, and so they're not the same in that they're not from the same family or anything like that. They're from different parts of the world. But again, what I like about that particular plant, which is why I'm sharing about it, is one, it is something from the Southeast. And so lots of the tribes from the Southeast, like the Cherokee and the Choctaw and Chickasaw, et cetera, is something that they used on a regular basis as a stimulant because it's got caffeine in it. Yeah.
All right. Thank you. Do you have any information on possible plant fellowships?
Oh, I know I'll just say not off the top of my head at this moment.
All right.
I do see things come across, through my emails and stuff like that. And that's, I know I've seen them in the past. I just can't think of anything right now.
All right.
Yeah.
Any book recommendations to learn about traditional plants?
I'm not going to say any in particular right now. I'll just say maybe a bookstore. So Birch Bark Books, which is in Minneapolis.
Good idea.
If you go on their website, they actually have a section just on the natural world and on gardening and on plants, and they have a great selection. There's always new books out there to look at for learning about native plants. And then there's also good ones too that are written by non-native people who know a lot and have learned a lot about foraging and how to process native plants. So there's kind of both that you can find out there. Birch Bark Books has both. I'll just say that they do include both books written by Indigenous people and books written by non-Indigenous people, but because they have gone through and selected good ones, I just think it's a good place to go to kind of see what they have available.
Yes, they're online.
Yes.
Online and in Minneapolis here. So next question. Is there a medicine for preventing seizures?
So I usually don't like providing medical advice for particular medical issues online. But I'll just say that some of these ones like valerian and others have been used by Indigenous people for things like epilepsy, but not for some, I'll just say not when you're having a seizure. It's something that you would just take on a regular daily basis as preventative. But it's something, again, with some of these things, you need to do all of those other things first before you use medical, or you use particular medicines for that. And depending on what you're interested in, most Indigenous people here in North America are interested in learning about the native plants for their own community and the native plants that their own tribe has used or their family has used, which is why I tried to select stuff from around around the United States. There is also plants from around the world that often have these kinds of medicinal qualities that will help with specific diseases that are not native to the United States or North America. And so those you can often see a practitioner about. One of the things I'd always say, especially if you're looking for something for a very particular medicinal medical issue, is talk to a practitioner, talk to a professional, and or even talk to your doctor, a Western medical doctor, because they know about these things as well, and sometimes even use them within their practices. Yeah,
that is such, I'm so glad to hear you say that. It's such good advice, because there are, I in my own life have done that, with my health issues, to talk to my regular doctor and a practitioner who knows, who's given me medicine for healing. Yes. And most of them will say, yes, we need both,
Yeah.
Yes, helps. One last question, because of the interest of time we have here, we have another announcement to make. Is somebody said, are there medicines you recommend for eczema?
So again, I don't really like sharing about particular medical issues or like diseases. But in this particular case, I mean, there are, so what you're interested in is, you're interested in medicines that do two things. One is dealing with inflammation. So you're going to want to look for an anti-inflammatory that is external, something that works externally as an anti-inflammatory. And then usually you're going to also want to look for something that is going to deal with the itchiness of that. And so there are some medicine and so I'll just say there's one that the Blackfeet tribe has used historically that they mix with another, where they use one that deals with the anti-inflammatory and they use one that dries everything up, so it deals with the itchiness. And those are two different plants. So yeah, there is stuff for eczema. I would find out what your tribe probably uses within your own region and the area that you're from first. But you're going to be looking for those two things, and the anti-itchiness and the anti-inflammatory, because it needs to deal with both. So
for not wanting to address specific medical issues, you do really well. You do really good. And, you know, as I'm thinking about this, going to your tribe, you know, or it was someone in your, or, you know, a nation in your region makes so much sense, because if we are from there, then those medicines were meant for us, and then it does increase our sense of connectedness. You know, really, it's all full circle. I just really appreciate hearing that, and that is really such good advice, and I thank you for that. So we're going to make one more announcement before we go, Dr. LaPier. So you just stay tight. And Lacey Kinnard is going to give us an announcement.
Bonjour, I have some exciting news. My name is Lacey Kinnard and I am the programs coordinator here at NABS. Thank you for being part of our webinar today, and thank you to Dr. LaPier for sharing all this wonderful Indigenous plant knowledge. I know it's very widely yearned for, and that's why we did a part 2, is because so much we got so much good feedback on wanting more information that we need a part 2. So I wanted to share information on our Truth and Healing Commission bill, and many of you may know already, last year we had a hearing in the Senate Committee of Indian Affairs last summer. It was in June, and at that time it was called S2907, and because of the new Congress this year it is called S1723, the bill to establish a Truth and Healing Commission on Indian boarding school policies in the United States. Because of that hearing last summer, we were able to move forward and not have a hearing again this year. And as of 2 weeks ago, it passed the committee of the Senate Committee on Indian Affairs, which we have not made this progress with this bill as of today. So it's a huge step in moving forward to create this commission. The commission was amended a little bit from last year's version, but the main 4 bullet points that I want to share with you is this bill will conduct a full inquiry into the assimilative policies of the United States Indian boarding schools, including identifying the locations of children's burial sites, documenting ongoing impacts, and locating church and government records. That's one major point. Another one is that this commission will collect testimony from boarding school survivors, tribes, and subject matter experts. It will create a findings and recommendations report identifying legislative and administrative actions to address the impacts of the United States Indian boarding schools. And lastly, it will investigate beyond the limited scope of the Department of Interior's Federal Indian Boarding School Initiative by looking into state, local, religious, and private institutions that operated Indian boarding schools to carry out the policy. So beyond the DOI's federally supported school list, this commission will also include schools that were not federally supported. We currently have 28 co-sponsors, which is a very nice number, but we are looking to increase that number on the Senate side. And the next step in this process is it will go to the Senate floor for a Senate floor vote. We're not sure of the timeline of this at this point, but what can you do to help get this passed and help gain more co-sponsors is to contact your United States senators and ask them to support S1723, the bill to establish a Truth and Healing Commission. If you have any questions, the link was just dropped in our chat. That brings you to our Truth and Commission page. And feel free to reach out to us. If you have any questions, we will be launching a toolkit in the near future, and a lot of work is going into this. We have a lot of work on the House side to do. Unfortunately, we have to start over on the House side as far as many of you submitted letters of support on the House side, and we will have to do that again. Unlike the Senate side, those carry over, but on the House side, we have to resubmit things. So when that time comes, we will send out emails, check our social medias for that timeline, those instructions, and when we're ready to rock and roll with that part. We really appreciate your support on getting this bill passed. The time is now to create this Truth and Healing Commission, and miigwech for your support.
Thank you, Lacey, and thank you everyone for being with us today. We especially give a Wopila Tanka, a huge, big, heartfelt thank you to Dr. LaPier. I think, Dr. LaPier, this is just me, and it's always about what I want to do. I think we have to have you back again, because the questions just rolling in, and people are just really enjoying this. It's something that is so important for our healing. And people are hearts and yeses and hand claps when I said, have you come back again. So if you're willing, I would really like more information in the way that you share it is so understandable. You have a gift, and I really appreciate you sharing that beautiful gift with us. So to everyone else on here, thank you. Definitely part 3. Somebody said definitely part 3. So I thank you, everyone who has logged on and joined us today. Please share the information with that we shared with you about our bill, and you can log in and get part 1 and have part 2. I would really ask you to say, however it is that you lift your voice to the Creator in your petitions, to pray for that bill, to pray for those who are hearing to vote on it, that they will see this as a way to give back, a way to participate in healing for our nations. And we continue to pray for our natural world, because if the natural world is not here, neither are we. And all of our medicines that we need comes from there. So thank you, everyone, and we will see you down the road. Doksha ke.
Well, thanks everyone for coming. I really appreciate it. And thanks NABS again for the invite. And we'll see you next time. And again, I'll add to what Sandy just said, and Lacey, one, pray and then act. So get out there and call your congressman, write to your congressman, email your congressman, so we can move this bill forward, and all of the other public policies that NABS has been working on and will be working on in the future. You need to pray, then act. So thanks everybody, and we'll see you next time.
That's a great t-shirt. Pray, then act. Doksha, everyone.